Okay, today we're going to talk about Isaiah 9:6 in the Christian Bible. It's Isaiah 9:5 in the Hebrew Bible. And this is a standard Trinitarian verse that is used to prove the Trinity and was prophesied. And this is, however, not mentioned in the New Testament anywhere as about Jesus. So this is something that was found allegedly by Christians post biblical times, post biblical writing as applicable to Jesus. And it's actually a fixture now of the argument. Now, just I want you to see how it reads in Hebrew. This is a Hebrew translation of Tobias Singer, but we'll see why. He has it for a child has been born, past tense, to us. A son was given to us, past tense, and the authority was placed on his shoulder, past tense. And the wondrous advisor, mighty God, eternal Father, called his name Prince of Peace, past tense called. So you see, there's four past tenses. Now I want to show you how it looks in our NIV, but it's very similar in the KJV. So this is how the NIV reads. For us, a child is born. That's in present tense, not past tense. To us, the son is given. That's present tense, not past tense. And the government will be on his shoulders. That's future tense, not past tense, as it should be, as according to Tobias Singer. And he will be called those names. And that's also future, not past tense, as Tobias Singer has it. We will see when we look at BibleHub.com that they have two ways of showing you how a text should be translated. Let me just show you this. So let's check Tobias Singer's translation in real time. Now we can see he has it completely different than the NIV. NIV is inconsistent in four places. It has the present tense, child is born, son is given instead of past tense, government will be on his shoulders. That's future tense, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, future tense. So there's an inconsistency between Tobias Singer and the NIV. And so now let's go, we want to go to Bible Hub. We're Christians. We think we can go to Bible Hub and get an honest, good to goodness answer. So let's go over to Hebrew and let's read it here. And we're going to actually read, it's going to have confirming is born. But when we go over to the right, it's perfect tense. So that's a past tense. We go over to where it says is given, and that's present tense. And Tobias Singer has it past tense. And yet, when we go over to the right, we're going to see it's a perfect tense. So that means it's past tense. And then over here, where it says and will be, it says this is consecutive imperfect or imperfect consecutive. And when we go out and we study what that means, it doesn't mean, it says it means most frequently, this is a wiki source, the imperfect. Wiki source says it means the sense of a Greek aorist, which is basically past tense in the Greek, or the Latin historic perfect, which again is past tense. So we are explained that this particular tense, which is the consecutive imperfect, is a past tense, but the Bible Hub is actually backing up the NIV that you can use this future tense instead. And same thing here, and will be called. The fourth issue is got another consecutive imperfect consecutive, and it's a past tense, historic. It corresponds to the historic past in Latin. So we can see there's four tenses that don't match the way Bible Hub itself is making it look to us. So the Bible Hub is making it look like we're not being lied, making it look like the tenses are opposite of what they are. So Bible Hub is corroborating the lies of the translators, and so you can go to the translators, and they're all systematically this lie. There's a couple of exceptions. In Young's literal, the child has been born to us, a son has been given to us, so those are correct. But that's pretty much it. And he does call his name wonderful, kind of in the present tense, not that harmful. But by and large, all the tenses are incorrect on this. I mean, 26 Bibles, almost everyone have four errors in each one, with the exception of Young's literal, maybe a couple more. I've not looked at every single one. It's just overwhelmingly the case that we Christians have presented a false argument for the Trinity. And I have one point I want to make about that, which is, just look at this. So if you're going to say that Jesus is being prophesied as the mighty God and the Prince of Peace, then you have to admit that it's also saying everlasting Father, which would mean that Jesus is the Father, not the Son. And in that case, this isn't a proof of the Trinity. This is a proof of the deity of God, and that God came in the child of Jesus and not Jesus the Son. Excuse me, not the God the Son, but instead God the Father. So it really is a self-defeating thing, because this disproves, or excuse me, yes, this would prove that the virgin birth was not Jesus as the Son of God coming, but would prove God the Father was born in the Virgin instead of God the Son. So it doesn't prove God the Son exists. It proves that God the Father exists, and he is the one who came as the child. That's what we would have to conclude if this is applicable. But now what we really know is it's not true. So we're going to examine this passage in the and allow Skobek, Rabbi Skobek, and Tobias Singer to both give their opinions about this passage.
The last passage we'll be studying is from the chapter 9 in Yeshayahu. Isaiah chapter 9. The operant verse, the verse that Christian missionaries focus on, is verse 5, although in a Christian Bible it's verse 6. So again, in the Jewish Bible we're talking about verse 5, in the Christian Bible verse 6. Let's just read the passage together. It says here in verse 5, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace." So it seems from this passage in Isaiah, there's going to be a child that's born, and he's going to be called the Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. And Christians say, you see, from this verse in Isaiah, the Messiah will be divine. The Messiah is not going to be a regular human being. Christians insist that you see from this verse, the Messiah will be God himself. That's the claim that Christians make. What we're going to try to examine in the next few minutes is, number one, is this chapter, in Isaiah, is it really speaking about the Messiah? Meaning when you read this verse from Isaiah, what tells you in this verse that it's a reference to the Messiah? It just seems to be an assertion that Christians are making. But there's nothing in the verse itself that identifies the Messiah as the subject. So that's one question. Is this passage really a passage about the Messiah? Or is that simply an assumption that Christians are making? Number two, is this chapter really telling us that this child is going to be God? Is that what the chapter is really telling us, that this child is going to be God? And number three, is there any reason to believe that this passage is about Jesus? Meaning, how do we know that this passage is about Jesus? Again, Christians can assert that, they can claim that, but what is the evidence? What's the proof that this passage is referring to Jesus? Those are the three questions we're going to try to examine.
Now, is the NIV an honest translation or a dishonest translation to support Trinity doctrine? Because the Trinitarians use this passage and ignore the everlasting Father, and they just look at the word mighty God, Prince of Peace, and that's all they care about. And they ignore the real problem of their argument, which is it says everlasting Father. So only Trinitarians would seek to corrupt this verse and say it says things it didn't say. So, okay, it's already coming up on my screen. So I want to show you what Christians have to defend. Literally, if you're a Jewish person, what will you think of a Trinitarian Christian who did this to their Bible? So we're not just corrupting our Bible. Oh, they're that's a given. We can do that to our own Bible. But what about corrupting their Bible? Corrupting how their Bible should be translated? Well, let's see. We don't change the verbs. We don't change the tenses. We'll put that down in our our interlinears. We'll say what the tenses are correctly, but we won't translate them correctly. And we will and our Bible Hub will actually defend that the true translation is what we see on the page, even though they're the words, the meaning behind the tenses that they use are not those words. In other words, they're giving us a summary that matches the mistranslation of the NIV and the KJV and all the other Christian Bibles. They're all mistranslated, but they'll tell you what the tense is at the same time. That it's a perfect tense or it's a whatever tense. It's just unbelievable. Watch this. And then I'm gonna make us watch this rabbi very nicely go through and destroy and demolish all of the lies of our translators. and the Bible Hub people who did put down the correct tense, but just said the translation still is this corrupt wrong tense. We'll see. So let's look at it one at a time. Skobek will claim at 049 of the upcoming clip, a child was born is the correct translation. He says it's not the present tense is born, which is what Bible Hub will say is the correct translation, but it will then show you the correct tense, which isn't present tense. Then Skobek claims at 250 of this clip coming up, a son has been given, and it's a past tense. He's going to prove it over and over with numerous examples throughout the Bible. And he's going to say it's not the present tense is given, as you'll see Bible Hub will tell you is the correct translation. And we continue. And Skobek claims at 325 of this clip that's coming up, his name was called instead of what the Bible Hub says it is. It's they will translate it as will be called as if it were future tense. But Bible Hub gives you tenses that don't match that. They identify tenses that don't match that.
The question that we're going to ask at the very beginning is this chapter really describing a future birth? Isaiah, who wrote this, is living approximately 700 years before Jesus. So is Isaiah here speaking about someone who will be born in the future? Is this child that is spoken about in chapter 9 a child that will be born 700 years later? Is Isaiah describing a child who will be born 700 years later? So we have in this passage several expressions which make it very, very clear. Isaiah is speaking about a child who has already been born. Isaiah is speaking about a child who has already been born. For example, Isaiah says, Ki yeled yulad lanu. A child has been born to us. It says Ki yeled yulad lanu in Hebrew because a child was born to us. How do we know the word yulad means was born in the past? Very simple. Look up every time the word appears in the Hebrew Bible and check it out. So for example, in Genesis chapter 4, verse 26, and to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enosh. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. It wasn't talking about someone who will be born in the future. It's talking about Enosh, who was already born. Genesis chapter 35, verse 26, and the sons of Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, were Gad and Asher. These are the sons of Jacob, which were born to him in Padan Aram. They already had been born. Judges chapter 18, verse 29, and they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father, who was born unto Israel. Howbeit the name of the city was Laish at first. Jeremiah chapter 20, verse 15, Cursed be the man who brought tidings to my father, saying, A man-child is born unto you, making him very glad. In Psalm chapter 87, verse 5, Out of Zion, and of Zion it shall be said, This and that man was born in her, was born, already was born in her, and the highest himself shall establish her. Ruth chapter 4, verses 16 to 17, And Naomi took the child and laid it in her bosom and became a nurse to it, and the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, This is a son born to Naomi. The son was already born to Naomi. And they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. In addition, Isaiah says not just that the child was born to us, but Isaiah says, Ben nitan lanu. A son was given to us. A son has been given to us. And again, this phrase in Hebrew, nitan, means in the past, was already given to us. So we know that this child that we're talking about in Isaiah chapter 9 is not someone who will be born in 700 years. It's someone who has already been born while the prophet was speaking. Also, we're told, Vayikra Shmo. His name will be called or has been called already in the past. So in the Hebrew Bible, Vayikra is always referring to someone who has already been given a name in the past. So Genesis chapter 1, verse 5, And God called the light day, Vayikra. Not God will call the light day. God already called it in the past. It already happened. And the darkness he called night. Genesis chapter 3, verse 20. And Adam called his wife's name Eve. Again, it's not referring to something he's going to do in the future. It's something that already took place. On the next page, Genesis chapter 25, verse 26. And after that came his brother, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. Not again in the future, it already was called Jacob. That was his name. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bore him. Isaiah chapter 21, verse 8. And he cried, "A lion, my Lord, I stand continually upon the watchtower in the daytime. I am set my ward whole night." And he cried. Again, that's the word vayikra. Isaiah 22, verse 12. And in that day did the Lord God of hosts call to weeping, and to mourning, and to baldness, and to girding with sackcloth. Again, it's not something that's going to happen in the future. It's describing something that already happened. In Isaiah chapter 36, verse 13, then Rav Shaka stood and cried with a loud voice. Vayikra, he called out with a loud voice in the Jews' language and said, "Hear ye the words of the great king, the king of Assyria." So again, describing something not that's going to happen in the future, something that already happened.
Okay, so we're going to go back to Rabbi Michael Skobach another time, and this time he's going to explain that just because you have a name that describes you as if you were God, it could even call you, your name would be the name of God, doesn't make you God. It's saying something else about God, but it's not making that person being identified as God. That's not the point of being named a certain way. So he's going to show you a lot of interesting examples. And one of them, though, is interesting. It's where the El Gabor shows up again, but in plural. And he says the way you know Gabor doesn't mean God is this God plural is put into Sheol. So the word Gabor doesn't mean God. That's an assumption or an incorrect interpretation. So it just means mighty ones, particularly in the passage dealing with them being in Sheol, hell. Therefore, if it's singular, mighty one, we shouldn't infer it's God because when it was pluralized, it clearly didn't mean God. So these are how you can reconstruct word meanings by seeing how it's used in other contexts and used as a plural. So anyway, he'll go through that, and it's 3.5 minutes. But I think Christians in general, we do not understand that what you're named doesn't mean who you are. It doesn't mean if it says. Yahweh is salvation or Yahweh saves in Jesus' name. That doesn't mean make Jesus Yahweh. That doesn't make him the Father. It's just simply something about your name declares something about God, which is great. It doesn't mean you're God or you're Yahweh. Okay, so let's go listen to this.
However, even if this phrase, the whole phrase, is taken as the child's name, it would most certainly not indicate or prove that the child is divine or the child is God. The great mistake that Christians make is to assume that if someone has a name which contains God in the name, that person must be God. That's an absurd assumption, and we'll see why in a minute. 1 verse 3, there's someone that has the name Eli. You probably might even know people today whose name is Eli. Eli means my God. We don't think that that person is God because they have the name Eli. In Judges chapter 9, verse 5, there's someone, if you turn the page, whose name is Yotham, or Yotham. Yotham means the perfect God. God is perfect. Not that this person is a perfect God. This person's name is telling you that God is perfect. Now, or in Exodus chapter 7, verse 1, God says to Moses, "See, I have made you an Elohim to Pharaoh." Moses is told by God, Moses, you to Pharaoh are going to be an Elohim. What does this word Elohim mean? It could be a designation for God. But the word El in Hebrew simply means powerful. So what God is saying is, Moses, to you, you're going to be a powerful one to Pharaoh. For example, in Genesis chapter 31:29, the phrase says, Yesh le'el yadi. There's power in my hand. No one would assume that that verse is saying that my hand is God. But there the word El simply means power. It's within my power. We have, for example, in Ezekiel 32:21. Now this is a very interesting passage because the name of this child, according to this reading of Isaiah, again, we saw that in the first reading, the child's name is not Mighty God. Right? The child's name is just Prince of Peace. But according to the other reading, where part of the child's name is El Gibor, does that mean that the child is God? Look at Ezekiel chapter 32, verse 21. The strong among the mighty will speak to him out of the midst of hell, Sheol, with them that help him. They are gone down, they lie uncircumcised, slain by the sword. Ele Giborim. In Isaiah chapter 9, verse 5, it's El Gibor, mighty God. And this is Ele Giborim, the plural. The mighty gods? Are we going to assume that these powerful ones who are down in Sheol, in hell, they are not just God, but gods in the plural? So obviously, Ele Giborim, just because it has the word El in it, doesn't mean that they're God. It just means strong, mighty ones. So strong among the mighty. Again, any name that contains God in it is not speaking about the person being God. It's a description of who God is. So for example, we have someone named El-Hanan. What does the name El-Hanan mean? It simply means God is merciful. It's not saying that the person who has the name El-Hanan is God. Or, how about this name? Chizkiyahu. In English we say Hezekiah. But what does Chizkiyahu mean? Chizkiyahu means Chazak, Yah, the mighty God. So Hezekiah's name is mighty God. Does that mean that Hezekiah, Chizkiyahu, is God himself? No. It's telling you that God is mighty. Now what is the name of this child? So if you go back again to the passage that we're studying, chapter 9, verse 5. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. This is obviously a Christian translation. However, a perfectly good translation of this verse. Again, if you were able to parse out the Hebrew, a perfectly good translation that is never raised as a possibility by Christians would be the following. The wondrous advisor.
Okay, so if you go to Bible Hub and you go to Isaiah 9:6, you can pick the tab called Hebrew, and up comes this list of all the words and how they're to be translated in this particular passage. And what you're seeing here is how all the English Protestant translations, most of all, I double check. I'll double check another time. Dewey Rhymes would be the Catholic, and it's exactly as it says here. So they are not telling you the truth, or are they telling you the truth? Is that Jewish rabbi lying to us? Or is the Trinitarians lying to you and me and the Jewish people and allowing Christian missionaries to go out and lie to Jewish people about their own Bible? What do you think is the truth, ladies and gentlemen? Well, is born, he said was born, right? Well, look at the word. And I'm going to just say this. I don't know Hebrew, but I'm trained in Latin. I'm trained in Greek. I'm trained in Italian. I'm trained in Spanish. I even studied French, so I think I know what the word perfect means. It's not is born. It was exactly as Scobik says, was born. All right. Now they say this is correct. Is given. This is how all the English Bibles read, the NIV, the KJV. Are you, Bible Hub, just going to go like a sycophant and put down a false translation because that's the way the Christian Protestant Bibles read it? Or won't you give us the truth that it's a birth that already took place? Well, let's see. It's the same thing again. It's perfect. Perfect third person masculine singular. And I'm going to tell you, the word perfect means it already happened. It doesn't mean is given in the present. No, it's perfect. Was given. And Skobik is right again. So that's 2 times we've lied in a Bible Hub summary of how the words are to be rendered, therefore confirming the lie 27 times. We'll go check in a minute. We got to go check all the mistranslations. Like Skobek is totally right, but he's being such a nice guy about it. I'd be like, these Trinitarian Bibles have been translated to make this passage, which their own gospels don't even mention as a passage that applies. They're willing to even distort our word, the word of God, to make their Trinity doctrine come true. But they don't read the word everlasting Father. It's kind of funny. Okay, now this one is a little more difficult. Because I've never seen this thing. It's called consecutive imperfect. Okay, and I had to open it up earlier. And let me see here. So you when you click that button, you go and you see there's something called consecutive imperfect. Do you see that? Never seen or heard of that before, but I decided to look it up. And just so we know, if you look it up, it's wiki source says the imperfect consecutive is used in this way most frequently as the narrative tense corresponding to the Greek aorist. I know what that is. That's a finite time in the past, or the Latin historic perfect, telling an event that happened in the past, but you'll talk about it in an imperfect sense. It's hard to explain. And then here we go, and will be called. So we have and will be the government. Now we have another one, and will be called, and there it is again, consecutive imperfect. And we know that's already the historic perfect, meaning the past, not the present, and not in the future. I mean, and they are rendering it. They are confirming that you can just translate that as will be called. That's what Bible Hub is saying. Now let's look is what's influencing them, the 27 versions of this. And I'm going to suggest to you that's exactly why they're doing this. So let's go over to parallel and then start going over this. A child is born, that's present, not past, is given, that's present, that's not past, will be in the future, is not perfect as it should be. He will be called, that should be perfect. So we have how many mistranslations in just one verse? 1, 2, 3, 4. Is it being covered up? 1, 2, 3, 4. All four are being covered up by Bible Hub, giving us a false translation according to Skobek. So I'm gonna say this. I don't know Hebrew, but I think a Hebrew Bible rabbi would know. So he's going to be my defense expert. Okay, so we're going to go back another time to Rabbi Skobek to have him tell us who is this child, because he's saying it's already happened. So at the time Isaiah is speaking in Isaiah 9, I'm going to try to simplify it for you. He's saying a child has been born at that time, and through this child, a great victory will happen that will save the Jewish people. And he's going to tell you this person is Hezekiah, King Hezekiah. And that king is the one who is born, and then years later, he leads the people in a time that the Assyrian army assembles an army of 185,000 against Jerusalem. And this is recorded in 2 Kings 19, verses 31, 32 through 36. And this passage reflects that a 185,000 man army is defeated by Hezekiah by his prayer. He prays the night before. The next day is going to be this amazing battle. They don't have enough forces to beat 185,000 men. And Hezekiah prays this prayer, and God miraculously saved the Jewish people. This is the southern kingdom, Judea, and the northern kingdom had already separated and was, on the other side. And so the Assyrians are massed to destroy them, and it's going to be all over by daybreak. They're going to be all annihilated. They think they're going to be annihilated. Instead, all 185,000 of the troops die. And independent from him, I know that Herodotus, a Greek historian, recorded this event in history. This is a part of Greek historical records, that the Assyrians mysteriously died one night, and it was ascribed that these rats ran all over their camp, and somehow they got all ill from the rats and died. I mean, so this is a miracle of God that is corroborated by outside historians, and in a way that only God can do. So, yes, a miracle would happen, and Skobek is going to say what tips it off is that the miracle is elsewhere described as it will be as it was in the days of Midian. The victory was given to Gideon, and Gideon, first shows up and says, "God, I'm the weakest of the group, but let me help out here." And I have 10,000 men. It's going to help him. And God says, "No, no, no, that's too many men. You're going to think if you win, it was because you had a lot of guys. I want you to reduce your forces." Eventually, God gets the forces down to 300, and then Gideon goes out with one of the third of them, and that 100 men defeats I think it's over 100. No, I don't know how many the Midianites, but it was a huge force. I think it was like over 10,000 men. So 100 men defeat 10,000 men, let's say, whatever it is, unbeatable. Couldn't win. So clearly God intervened and did a miracle for Gideon. And so that's what Skobek is saying is you can tell what happens with Hezekiah in reality, where you have this small contingent kept at Jerusalem under King Hezekiah, nowhere a match for 185,000 men, and God just intervenes just like God intervened from Gideon and gave him a victory where there was unbelievable odds against them. And by the way, God said he did this for the sake of the house of David, that his goal was to preserve that house, and King Hezekiah is in the line of Jesus. So just so you know, so this is the true person that was being talked about in Isaiah 9:6. So you have to see this from Jewish eyes, how lying and despicable our Bibles look to them, because we have all these mistranslations. We have Bible Hub backing it up, but giving you the tenses are not in the future. I mean, and so it's just this is the scholarship we have handed them and said, look, believe in our religion, and yet we have lying. I mean, it's not even an honest question. I mean, you know what I mean? It's you can't even honestly debate that it's past tenses, and yet we're changing them all 4 times in one sentence into future tenses. Do you see what they would be thinking of us? And yet he's being so nice and calm. This Skobek guy, he's not. I would be raking the Christians over the coal if I were him. Because I don't want people evangelized by Jewish people. He should be raking them over the coals, and he's being fairly nice and decent to us. But listen to what he has to say. It's a short conclusion, a couple minutes, and he gets to say this because he understands his own people's history. So I'm a Gentile. I'm sitting on the corner. I this is his history, and let him tell this story. So,
Whatever incredible miracle Isaiah chapter 9 is talking about is the exact same miracle that we see here in 2 Kings chapter 19. And if you read Isaiah chapter 37, it's not in front of you, but Isaiah chapter 37 verse 32. Isaiah chapter 37 verse 32, it repeats the same exact expression. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this in describing the great victory in the days of Hezekiah against the king of Assyria. So what is very clear, what is incredibly clear when you study chapter 9 of Isaiah, is it's not describing someone who's going to be born in 100 years in the future. Isaiah is describing an incredible challenge to Jewish continuity that existed in his days. It was the attack by the Assyrians upon Jerusalem. And Isaiah says there was a child who was born. He was already born to us. When Isaiah gave this prophecy, Hezekiah was a young boy. But this young boy is going to be a prince of peace because he's going to bring peace to the Jewish people. And we're told that the victory that he's going to win will be just like the victory in the days of Midian. And the two stories of Gideon destroying the Midianite army and Hezekiah basically leading the Jewish people to destroy the Assyrian army is the exact same story. And all three references to the zeal of the Lord of hosts performing it are in the context of Hezekiah's victory against the Assyrian army. So again, to sum up, this chapter in Isaiah is not telling us that this child is going to be divine, that this child is going to be God. Even if the child had such a name, it would not prove the child is God. But more importantly, we know who the child was. The child was King Hezekiah. All of the textual clues point us to that. It's describing a child who was already born when Isaiah said this prophecy. It's describing a child who's going to be responsible for the salvation, the rescue of the Jewish people from an incredible enemy, just like in the days of Midian, in a miracle that the zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform.
okay, so I'm going to now conclude, and I'm going to let Tobias Singer have the last word, just a few words. And it says everything I have to say to the Trinitarians. You put us in this position. You put us in the position where the church looks like liars and corrupters. You Trinitarians did this, not the people who believe Jesus is the Son of God, who believe he's a human being and dwell by the Father, as he said, It's not the people who believe that Jesus is correct, that the Father is the only true God in John 17:3. It's you Trinitarians who believe Jesus is God. And yet you, in the name of God, in the name of who you say is God, Jesus, you have made us look like fools and criminals. Because to what would be the worst crime a Christian could commit? Steal some money from a bank? No, it's stealing the word of God, robbing it and destroying it and twisting it to your ends, changing the verb tenses, changing this verse not once, not twice, not 3 times, 4 times. Needless to say that doing this episode, I came across things that shocked me that I never knew before. So, excuse me for getting a little upset there. It is hard to believe people do this to the Word of God and have no remorse and will not fix it. And anyway, so now I'm going to let Tobias Singer take over. He's going to call them out, and then he's going to prove his case verse by verse, word by word. And they deserve to listen to this. And if they can refute it, put your comments here, Trinitarians. If you can prove that any of this is false, I'd love to hear it. You've got Skobek and you got Tobias Singer saying the same thing. That's like an echo, but they do seem to be two different people. so, so I'm going to assume that there's a consensus that this isn't craziness. They're not crazy. The craziness is you've got 26, 27 Bibles on Bible Hub that all read the wrong way, with one exception, the literal Bible, and a couple of times, 2 out of 4 times in the Young Literal. That's about the only thing I've seen in reviewing that. And then you've got the Bible Hub backing up the false translation. Come on. What's the answer here? I'd love to hear it. If anybody can provide any plausible excuse here, I'd love to hear it. But from what I can tell, this deserves an absolute censure from every Christian of good conscience.
Not how the church plays with this. And we're going to see this text has become the most corrupted passage in all of Tanakh. So the nation screams out, a child was born to us, Ben Nitan Lanu. A son was given to us. Now we understand why he's called a child and a son. She's like out of nowhere. Like, what? Who's his daddy? The worst person ever. And notice the verbs are all in the past tense. Ki yelad yulad lanu. A son was given to us. In the Hebrew, it's the perfect tense. The church is going to, I don't know how to say it, the church is going to assault, molest these passages. All the verbs are changed from the past tense and the future tense. So as in the New American Standard Version, a child shall be born unto us. Where did you get that? And why does yulad everywhere else mean was born, but only here it means shall be born? The King James, a child is born to us. So we have this weird, is with verb being, which is very amorphous. They knew what they were doing, but then they go, a son shall be born to us. Vatihi ha-misra al shechmo, and the leadership was put on his shoulder. Vatihi, and here it gets very interesting. Vayikra shemo pelayoet el gibor aviad sar shalom. Now, Christian translations invariably render this, his name shall be called the Wonderful Advisor, El Gibor, the Mighty God, Aviad, the Everlasting Father, Sar Shalom, Prince of Peace. And they all run it that way, and that's all incorrect. And many people think that's the way it's supposed to be read because it runs nice in English. It's all wrong. The word Vayikra is, first of all, in the past tense, was, it's not will be called. It says Shemo, his name. Now, just so you know, like the NIV and other translators actually literally surgically remove the word name because they want this kid to be Jesus in the future and speaking about his deeds. So that could be removed by some English translators. But what happens is the word Vayikra is in the active voice, not in the passive voice. If you wanted to say a son shall be born to us in the passive voice, the way the Christian Bible, it would say Yikare, Vinikra. It wouldn't say Vayikra. Number two is by moving this around, what you're doing is you're just confusing the subject and the object utterly. So they're switching that around. The way the text is properly translated is Vayikra Shmo Pelio. It's the Wonderful Advisor, the Mighty God, the Eternal Father, called his name Sar Shalom, the Prince of Peace, because peace will be in his time, and you could see that all in Isaiah chapter 39. So just mess that around, alter that, and suddenly you have a Christological message.
I'll just say in closing that we need to pressure not only for the corruptions of our New Testament to be fixed, but the corruption of our original covenant writings, the corruptions, like in this verse. I mean, there's 4 corruptions in one verse. And I mean, I could take time to look at all of the verses, but they all appear to have the same 4. It's as if everybody's lost their minds and they don't care about Hebrew. And we're supposed to believe Tobias Singer and Rabbi Skobek have a conspiracy going on here, that they are making this up. They're both consistently telling us they're all completely false translations. So let's get with it, friends and brothers, because it's embarrassing to the church that people who call themselves Christ are defending us with lies and trying to convince Jewish people to believe in a Messiah based on lies. I mean, if we convince them and then they find out this was all a fraud, that these 4 the verse is a lie, then what do you think you've accomplished? You've accomplished nothing, because they're going to then repel themselves away from you. I mean, it's disgusting, pious frauds. Paul said it. If I say a lie, why am I still called? If I say a lie to advance my gospel, why am I still called a sinner? He's justified lying to advance his gospel. That's not from Christ. Christ doesn't allow you to do that, and you must all repent and fix your Bibles. So that's my message today. I pray to God that somehow this will be fixed before the end of time. It should be all fixed. All right. God bless. Take care, everybody.